Now, the practice for internal audit has a life cycle which contains 3 general phases: planning the audit, conducting the audit, and reporting the audit. These phases usually recur on a yearly basis. That is why the requirement of an ISO that at a minimum, the internal audit has to be performed at least once a year. How it is performed is still up to the audit team, depending on the audit program that you have created. Now, planning the audit. Before you embark on the journey of performing internal audits, you need to be prepared. You need to plan on how you intend to perform the audit. Not all audits are similar. Sometimes the organization may require a standard audit just to identify if the management system in place is working for the organization or not. Sometimes the organization may request an emergency audit due to the realization that the system does not provide its proper objectives and targets as expected by the business. So in doing an audit, we need to understand first why we intend to do the audit, for whom will we perform the audit, what would the audit contain, and what will be the coverage of our audit. In planning the audit, we have the following items. We need to understand the organization, your company. We need to determine its scope. We need to establish our audit process, our program, our team, our schedules. We need to prepare our toolkits and materials for performing audit, like the audit plan, the notices, the checklist, and we need to learn on how to perform or implement the actual audit. Gaining information. In any ISO, it was mentioned that the management system was established based on its organizational context, meaning that the management system must understand what this organization is all about, its process, its services, its products. In the case of an internal audit, they are required to have that same understanding, plus a better understanding on how the management system has been implemented or was established. The internal audit must understand known issues and problems of the organization, probably review previous audits, whether it's first party, second party, or third party, understand current standards and certification that the organization is holding, and know all the processes, products, and services that your organization is offering. The turtle diagram would be a very helpful item at this point in time. Once you have understood what your organization is all about, the internal audit team must determine the audit scope. The audit scope gives you a window of what the coverage for performing the audit will take. It helps in audit planning because if you understand the scope, you will know how many auditors you need, the timeline, the durations that you require, and the areas that you intend to visit. It must be clarified on the scope of where and how your audit will be performed. You should consider physical locations, organizational units, and understand how many activities and processes the organization is currently implementing. In some cases, organizations have an ISO only for a small scope, like the head office only. In other cases, implementation for ISO may entail enterprise-wide scope, which means the head office, including the 300 branches. This must be understood clearly by the internal audit team so they can plan a more suitable and effective way of dealing with the audit for the organization. Now, knowing your scope will give you an understanding of what you intend to bring forward. Your audit team. The question of how many auditors you need depends on the scope. If I'm going to audit one process, then obviously I only need one person to perform the audit. But if I intend to audit an enterprise-wide implementation of the system, then probably I need more than 20. It depends on the number of organizations that are involved in your scope. Team size and duration depends on a few items. This would be the size of the implementation of your management system or the complexity of the organization, the standard being applied, and the 9001 is pretty obvious, only contains 10 mandatory sections, but other standards have a little bit more lengthy content. The time available, the audit is only given a window of opportunity, which means the auditors can only perform an audit based on the agreement of the organization that they can afford, capable to perform the audit with, and the intent and purpose of the audit, whether this is a standard audit, an emergency audit, or whatever it is, the audit team must know so they can know how to deliver the audit suitably. Now, once you have established all those necessary information, you now put them in an audit plan. A primary artifact that most cases a certification auditor will look for. An audit plan is a document where written on it is all the details of performing the audit. The audit plan will contain itineraries, roles, responsibilities, areas to be covered by the audit. It should be for a year's basis. You can have your audit one time a year, or you can spread out quarterly or monthly and chop all the requirements accordingly. This depends on the audit team. The audit plan, understandably, should contain the agreed scope, the purpose and objective of the audit, its criteria, and all related documents, the dates and places where you intend to perform and conduct the audit, the processes, units, sites, activities, projects that are involved in the audit, an estimated duration for how long the activity will take, and who the auditors and who the auditee will be. The audit plan is shared across the organization, signed off by internal audit team, and should be notified across all involved entities. Now, once you are ready to perform an audit, you need to prepare your toolkits. An auditor can bring anything he needs to perform effectively the audit. This includes the famous checklist. You can create your own checklist, or you can probably download from the internet since there are a lot of people sharing checklists. If you do have a checklist for the 9001, that would be a great tool to help you perform the audit. But definitely your organizational activities are for your organization alone. The checklist for what your organization has is what the internal audit team must develop. You use audit checklist as a guide and to manage your time in performing the audit. It actually helps you remember certain requirements so you will not overlook these requirements. In preparing for checklist, you also need to know your techniques in performing audit. The audit team must learn a few tricks on how to perform an audit. You need to know how to put people at ease, or they will contribute to you all nonconformities even if you do not ask for them in the first place. If you do ask questions, they will willingly and truthfully, honestly answer what the results are. You need to know how to provide proper feedback. You are the auditor. And the one thing auditors don't want are auditors who do not respond on how they answer their questions. You need to show interest, nod from time to time, and show that you whether agree or not agree on what the statements are made. You need to read their signals. Some auditees have the tendency to lie. And in lying, the auditor may not get to the bottom of what the requirements criteria would state. whether it is conforming or not. You need to understand whether the auditee is truthfully answering you, hiding something, or actually did forget what he intended to show you. By learning how to read the signals, you will understand how to handle the audit when you conduct the activities for audit. This is planning the audit. Now, the next phase, conducting the actual audit. Time comes when your plan is now in effect. The window of opportunity for audit is now at hand. When you perform an audit, you need to perform the following activities. The opening meeting, perform the actual audit, remember to validate and agree the findings, review all your collective information with your audit team, and provide feedback with the auditees. The opening meeting is an important item, although it is optional for an internal audit team. But the reason why auditors practice this professionally is the opening meeting paves way for performing an effective audit. The opening meeting shows what your intentions are, who your audit team is, and the plan that you intend to undertake. You actually are given the opportunity to explain how you will perform the process and set the expectations of the auditee. Definitely, auditees will have questions regarding your audit. This is an opportunity for you to answer all those queries regarding your audit. And definitely, the opening meeting is to state your intent so you can get the auditee's cooperation in your conduct of an effective audit. Now, once the audit of the opening meeting is performed, it's time to perform the actual audit activities. In performing an audit, it is not that complicated. You do an ocular or a tour visit. You review documentation, soft copy or hard copy, regardless. You perform the interviews to validate all the documents that you have read. And you do sampling just to validate and prove that all your processes you're looking for are actually implemented. An auditor must have the right skills and use the right techniques to perform the documentation review and the interviews. They need to perform proper sampling of records. If you are an auditor, you do not have to look at all the records, hence the word sampling. The auditor is only bounded to select a few records, and if the records that you choose satisfies your requirement, then you may state on your finding the conformance of what your criteria that you are looking for. If you happen to find one sample that does not work for you, then you can state a nonconformance. Validate and agree the findings. It is important to note that when you do an audit, every nonconformance should be proven true. The auditee must accept and agree your findings. It can be agreed during the actual audit, or it can be agreed on a later review meeting with the auditee. It must be validated for you to use later on when you report the audit. Perform team reviews. If you have a large internal audit team, it is important for the team to discuss all their findings. They must share information with one another to understand requirements if their findings are suitable to be declared according to its compliance or conformance or its non-conformity. The team must agree if the findings will go to the report or not. They must discuss their recommendations and they intend to follow up actions on how to ensure that the findings are corrected on a later date. Now, the feedback client or the auditee's feedback meeting. It is important to also meet with your auditees or the organization requiring the audit. You must share with them your experience regarding the audit, especially if you have encountered certain issues and problems in your conduct of the audit. This must be discussed and arranged accordingly within your meeting with the auditees. You must ensure that all issues and problems are addressed accordingly. And you can also state on that meeting that the auditees can be given the opportunity to perform corrective action even before the audit report comes out. Now, that was the conduct of the audit. Now, reporting on audit. The end result of conducting an audit is the creation of the audit report. That pretty thick document where you find all, for most cases, non-conformances. True enough, the audit report will contain good points regarding conformities. But historically speaking, the audit report does contain, as a major part of it, all the non-conformances of the organization. Reporting an audit requires you to perform a few things: to write up all nonconformities, classify these nonconformities, compile and finalize the audit report, and perform the closing meeting. In writing the audit report, it is important to note a few items. If you intend to write nonconformities, first and foremost, they must be true, factual, and definitely objective. It is a no-no to have subjective statements within your audit report. Conformities must be clear and concise. It must explicitly state the criteria and your findings of why it did not conform, including the evidence that you find proving its non-conformance. You must identify the specific standard requirement clause if you are using an ISO to identify which requirement of the standard you do not comply with. Findings must be locatable not only by your team, but including the certification audit team. If the certification body cannot find or trace your relationship of your finding with other references, then you will have a problem with your audit. To find the exact instance, we need to ensure that we can prove this non-conformance with objective evidence. Each finding must be traceable, hence the requirement for a unique identifier. Each finding must be categorized accordingly, and the audit report must be, in the end, accepted and signed by the organization or the auditees. Now, classifying nonconformities. In the best practice world, there is only two kinds of categories: minor and major. It was explained earlier by Jong what minor and major is. But to repeat again the definition for what it is, a minor is a nonconformance based on a single lapse regarding a requirement of your criteria, the criteria you are looking for. So if, for example, you have 5 steps in a process and you discover that step 3 is not being performed, that single lapse will be recorded as a non-conformance for that requirement. This is minor. Now, what is major? A major is the absence, a total absolute absence of the requirement. If you are looking, for example, for a payroll process and you could not find a documentation at all, or even the proper practice of a payroll process, then this would be a major nonconformance. Sometimes your requirement from minor might incur several numbers of minor nonconformance. If you have so many minor nonconformance on a single requirement, this upgrades your requirement to a major nonconformance, because a major nonconformance also contains failures in the implementation of the requirement. Now, the actual audit report. The audit report is a formal, factual, agreed record of your conduct of the audit. It includes all the information to state your current or previous audit activity, including all the good points, which means the conformities, the non-conformities, your observations, your recommendations for corrective actions, your interactions with the auditees, the plans, the timescales, your summaries and conclusions, and your follow-up plan. The audit report must be filed and must be accepted and signed by the organization. The audit report will contain observations. Observations are not a kind of finding for a non-conformance. It is a unique item to classify certain statements that the auditor wished to identify during the audit. Observations are statements of findings that may lead towards a non-conformity. This would be, with regards to improvement, help improve the implementation of the organization's management system and its requirements. Now, lastly is the closing meeting. Once you have performed your audit, the last activity for your audit window would be the closing meeting. The audit team must now present their findings to the auditee, submit the audit report. The audit team must state the summaries and conclusions regarding the conduct of audit, must discuss and present all the nonconformities indicated, including the observation, must address problems, issues, and resolve misunderstandings during the conduct of the audit, and provide the recommendations needed for the auditees to start performing corrective actions. The closing meeting will also provide a picture of the intent of the audit team to perform follow-up actions regarding their audit findings. At the end of the closing meeting, this will end the entire audit window, therefore ending your audit activities. This is the life cycle of an internal audit. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Ted. Thank you. Thank you for that audit cycle. We have one quick question here, Ted. Do they need to be a certified internal quality auditor before they can even conduct an internal quality audit? I'll let you answer that, Ted.
Now, the internal audit team needs to be competent. This is the requirement. So a training for internal audit is required, which means you will be certified to a internal audit practice. Now, for the lead auditors, there is a certification for that, but it's still optional. If you take the proper certification for it, then you can be a certified quality internal auditor. But regardless for that, the organization at a base minimum must be certified, trained in the practice of an internal audit.
All right, so there you go. I hope that makes it clear. That's why it's very important for the internal quality auditors. Again, the operating word there is competent. So before the internal quality auditor can even conduct an audit, he or she must have at least attended a formal in-house training or a webinar like this, for example. Another question, Ted, is what if this is pertaining to a third-party audit?
Yes.
If the organization is, say, for example, audited by a third-party certifying body, what if the organization does not agree with the findings of the third-party auditors as to, major or minor? How can the auditor resolve this? So he's talking about third-party audit, meaning the not agree with the third party. Can they contest it? Can they question it? Can they appeal, for example?
Good question. Good question. If honestly and truthfully, the findings, the non-conformance finding stated on your organization is untrue, no? With proven evidence, again with evidence, then you can contest the finding. The third party or the certifying body will consider your request for removing the non-conformance. If you can justify or prove why the non-conformance should be there in the report.
Yes, and just to add to that, thank you, Ted. Just to add to that, take note that certifying body auditors, they always have appeal procedure, by the way. So if you have questions or clarifications in their audit report, you may actually do so during the closing meeting. As a matter of fact, you may even avail of the appeal procedure. And again, having said that, you can also do that internally, by the way. So if you have, for example, documented your internal quality audit procedure, you may want to insert in the internal quality audit procedure the appeal process, because you also need to give your auditees an avenue or an opportunity for them to somehow question your findings. No? So, and then if all these are cleared, resolved, then you can include that in the final audit report.
I'll give you an example. This depends on the scope of the implementation. For example, you only have one department who is ISO certified. Let's just say HR is the only department that's ISO certified. I remember it's pretty much scope-centric. But the auditor, the certification body, actually audited HR and out of scope, audited different departments. Therefore, placing the non-conformances discovered in the other departments into the report. This is a common mistake of certification auditors because of the unclear definition of the implementation of the management system. Now, that is how you make an appeal regarding the finding. And because of understanding, we now remove the non-conformance from the report.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Ted. Actually, and another question here is, Ted, I think you may want to answer this. What are the competencies for auditors? What are the needed competencies?
Well, the auditor must be trained in performing the audit process, the practices for establishing a audit program, hence the 19011. The auditor must understand the techniques needed in performing the actual audit, how to perform an interview, sampling of records, how to work and treat with people during the audit. And these are the requirements for an auditor.
Okay, thank you for that, Ted. Yes, there's a lot of elements in the competencies there, from asking the right question, from how do you behave during an audit. There are a lot of things that you need to know and things to avoid. So for example, number one there, let me just share with you this tip, is that we are not interrogators. Okay, so when we go there, we do not interrogate people. Even the questioning should be properly framed. What are leading questions? What are close-ended questions? What are open-ended questions? And basic tip there is that do not make it look as though you do not believe your auditee.
Oh yeah, important feedback.
Exactly. So aspects like that, including writing accurate reports. So
yes.
Now.
Oh yeah. For better understanding,
yes.
Auditors need to know how to perform, at least to a certain degree, root cause analysis. Because if you discover a finding, you need to prove it. And if you could not find the evidence, you need to know where the source of the nonconformance comes from. So it's important that that competency is instilled in an auditor.
Yeah, that's right. I think most of the questions here, Ted, are related to how do they really gain these competencies. Now, I understand this is a short webinar. This is a 1 hour webinar that has overshot the time frame. But anyway, since you asked many questions, we're actually Ted and I are hosting this full-blown course on July 9. So maybe you'd like to take note of that. That's on July 9. And so we're hosting this full-blown course. That's going to be with workshops. We're going to send worksheets, and it's with an exam. So when you attend that course, you have to take the exam, and then it's a first-party certification course. No, so I'll let Mike send you the invites there if you'd like to attend. So that's on July 9. And so the question here is, there's another question here, Ted. Can the management representative do system audit? Ted, you want to do the honor?
Okay. Definitely no. The internal audit team must be independent from the management implementation team. So if he is the management representing officer or the quality officer, for example, he cannot be the quality auditor. It has to be somebody else, totally independent from the system.
Yes, yes. So again, take note of the impartiality clause. No, if you let the management representative audit his or her own system, it's gonna be perfect.
That's a risk. Being biased is the risk, and all auditors know that.
Why would I shoot myself on the foot anyway if I'm auditing my system? So don't do that. No, so as a matter of fact, you let the lead auditor do the system audit, and there's another question here. Can we actually include findings from those areas outside the scope or accredited area? So meaning outside of scope. Can you include that in the audit report then?
Okay. Now, being an internal auditor, just to clarify on that point. Being an internal auditor, primarily, you need to check the compliance of the system based on the scope of the implementation. But it is optional that the audit team may perform audit outside of the scope since they are only working within the organization. Probably the purpose for auditing outside of scope is to understand, again, how to improve the rest of the organization outside of the implementation scope. But yes, you can do that as an internal auditor.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for that, Ted. Another question here is that will they have certificates from this webinar? Yes, we're going to distribute certificates of attendance for this webinar, right? All you need to do is click on the link. It's in the chat group. You need to fill up an exit poll or exit survey. We also wanted to know what your thoughts are about this webinar. Maybe you can share topics you'd like to discuss with. We're doing this every Thursday as part of our commitment to spread information, support you in the implementation of your management system. So we're going to distribute that. And I think a lot of questions here, Ted, about how can they attend the full-blown course. So that's on July 9th. That's one full day. I let Mike communicate with you on that and send invites. There's a very good question here, Ted. During this COVID pandemic, how do we go about the conduct of internal audit? Would you like to share that?
Interesting. Audits are not limited to physical visits. Audits can be performed remotely. The use of technologies to perform audit is a good opportunity in order to maintain your audit plans and to conduct effectively the audit. So you can do remote audits using messaging systems, voice over IP, or even video conferencing tools. You can perform audits that.
Yes, so that can be actually conducted. And just to share with you what we're doing from our end. So we've been auditing our clients off-site actually. Now that's a very good question. So here's a tip, for example. ensure that all the documents are submitted to the auditors way ahead. So that's number one, all right? You have to make sure that at least secured PDF or controlled copies of the manual, procedures, work instructions, forms, and records are scanned and submitted to you as an auditor. So we do the audit like this, for example, just like what you can see in the screen right now. And while it may not be 100%, we can still do the interview, verify, validate documents, and again, come up with audit reports. No? So like they all say, you need to adapt to the new normal. And apparently this is the new normal now. So even third-party audits, well, most importantly, first and second party audit are conducted via, this video conferencing. Okay, yeah, we just shared on the screen that's on July 9th. So if you'd like to attend, yeah, you may feel free to do that. Let me check, are there any other questions here? So just a follow-up answer to that scope. I think it was explained by Ted already. No, you cannot. Ted, what was that? We have to stick within the scope, right?
Well, primarily you should stick within the scope, but it's an option to go outside the scope as long as you are an internal auditor only.
Yes. So for internal audit, you're kind of flexible on that. Take note of the audit trail, right? There's what we call an audit trail. If the audit trail leads you outside of the scope, you may feel free to actually verify. For example, the scope of the audit is just 5 departments. All right. And then during the audit, you found out that one department, which is not within the 5, may also be at risk of nonconformities. Let's say, for example, the quality control or warehouse or motor pool was not included in the scope. As an internal auditor, you may actually include that in your audit trail. Or if you couldn't do that in the present audit, you may include that in the subsequent audit. All right. So take note that the audits can be, there will of course be subsequent audits, no, that you can do. Yeah, I think that's it. Another question here is why do we need to notify the auditee, or is it a surprise audit?
Okay. There's no such thing as a surprise audit. You need to notify the auditee. Because if you plan to audit them specifically on a date that you wanted to perform the audit, then you need to notify the auditee so they will be available on the day you arrive. Because if you do not notify them, you arrive and then the auditee is not there, then it will be a failed conduct of the audit. Right. You did not perform your audit. Yeah. You need to notify them in advance.
So by all means, you have to notify the auditee. Yeah. The last thing you want to do is that, when you go to the audit, your auditee is not there.
That's totally failed audit. There's no such thing as, who can I talk to? There's no such thing as that. Nobody will move forward to that.
That's good. My take on that, Ted, is that, you need to notify the auditee ahead of time so that they can file their leave of absences.
Yeah. Yes. Here's the good thing. Remember the opening meeting. That is where you validate your attendee's availability. Because if you discover on the opening meeting that the attendee is not available, even prior to a notice being given to the auditee, then that is the opportunity to look for an alternate auditee to replace the absent auditee. It is done during the opening meeting.
Right. Okay. There's another, I think we can take one or two more questions here before we wrap this up, Ted. I think, this can be our last question maybe. If there are no more questions, 2 more questions here, then we'll wrap it up. Shall the IQA team have their own quality objectives? What do you think, Ted?
Yes, the IQA team must have their own objectives. Being part of the management system, they must have their own targets and they must be measured for their performance as well.
Okay, so take note of that. Not only the IQA, you may also include your document controllers. No? So they have their own.
Everybody else, actually.
Yes, everybody else. At all functions of the organization, the quality objectives is required. No? If you review clause 6.2, it's right there. Okay, last question for the day, then we'll wrap it up. As an auditor, do we need to stop the audit at any time, especially if there are more than 3 major nonconformities seen or found during the actual audit? Ted, do the honors.
You do not need to stop. You need to look for it. Remember, as an internal auditee, the success of the management systems implementation is in your hand. You are the people responsible to improve the system. So do not stop when you find 3 or probably 4. You must continue to look for more. Ika nga, the more, the merrier.
Right. That is true. I certainly agree. My take there is that you may have to abort the audit if you found out on the document criteria that is really inadequate. Then right there you may abort that, no? Because again, in the first place, there's nothing to audit, only on the adequacy of the documents. But if the documents are in place, compliance is there, you're auditing effectiveness of implementation. You need not stop after finding 3 major NCs. No? You need to explore what they're
continue.
Yeah. So take note that you're the effectiveness of the system. So, all right, it's 10:28, and you guys are still there actually. We would like to thank you all. I know everyone is busy working at home, so thank you for joining this webinar. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule, joining us in these webinars. You may attend our free webinars every Thursdays, by the way. So next Thursday, we're doing root cause and latent analysis. So if this would interest you, you're all very welcome to join this. And we're going to talk about different tools and techniques on how do we conduct root cause analysis, which is of course part as well of our internal audit. And all right, I think that's all we have. Ted, hats off to you. Fantastic job you have right there. Thank you so much.
Thank you to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone. You please keep safe, and we can all grow through this pandemic, as we all say. So have a nice day. Enjoy the rest of the day. Mike will be communicating with you on the certificates of attendance, and if you can kindly please take some few minutes to fill up the exit poll again. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.